morning and welcome to World News, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Zalia Strzemska. We have to be prepared, said US President Donald Trump, reacting to former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev's warning to remember that Moscow possessed Soviet-era nuclear strike capabilities. Medvedev, who currently serves as the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, made these comments in response to Trump's threat to hit Russia and its oil buyers with punitive tariffs.
Well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people. Well, you just have to read what he said. He was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski met with his Ukrainian counterpart, Andrej Sibiha, on Friday at his residence in north-central Poland. The two discussed the ongoing war in Ukraine and plans to build joint production facilities aimed at strengthening both countries' defense capabilities. Here's more.
Putin boję się tylko Trumpa.
The only person Putin is afraid of is Trump. He wants to avoid sanctions. We have a deadline set for August 8th, and we understand his tactics and hear the signals. The Ukrainian side is ready for a meeting at the highest level, a leaders' summit, in any location, in any format. However, we believe that any meetings below the top level are merely technical. And when it comes to substantial, meaningful issues, a summit of presidents must be held, and we are ready for it. Vladimir Putin will only end this war when he realizes that he cannot achieve his goals at an acceptable cost. His weak point is the economy, which is already suffering. To keep the war machine running, Putin needs to continue funding for arms production, mainly through the sale of Russian raw materials. The European Union, under the Polish presidency, has imposed sanctions on Nord Stream and on the purchase of gas through alternative routes. Putin clearly took note of that. There is also a draft bill in the U.S. Congress that would impose draconian sanctions on countries that buy Russian hydrocarbons, thereby financing the war. I see that India has begun to withdraw from buying Russian oil. This is a real threat that could truly affect Russia's capacity and the calculations of its president.
Polish security services detained a man suspected of espionage. Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced Friday evening on social media. The man is allegedly a foreign military intelligence officer. According to investigators, the detained man worked from March to July in Poland, posing as a diplomat. He allegedly conducted intelligence activities against Poland and its allies, focusing on military structures. The man is a national of an Asian country formed after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. He has been charged, and a court has ordered his detention for 3 months. So far, 32 people have been detained on suspicion of acts of sabotage. These include Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, and a Pole and a Cambodian suspected of setting a fire to a large Warsaw shopping center in 2024. The U.S. military has released video of NATO's multinational battle group conducting joint live-fire training last month. Let's take a look.
Battle tanks, scout vehicles and anti-aircraft platforms from Romania, the UK and the US were deployed to northern Poland's Bemowo-Piskie training area. While NATO soldiers usually train with simulated or blank ammunition, live-fire drills allow them to practice complex battle scenarios under more realistic conditions, according to the commanders of the multinational battle group.
Our training enables us to heighten our lethality, to build interoperability, but most importantly, it helps us to understand where are places that we need to innovate. For example, we see in the contemporary operating environment, there's a large use of drones, and so we have to do things like modify the way that we clear bunkers or clear trenches, using that technology to enable us to be successful, but most importantly, implement those lessons learned from the contemporary operating environment and spread that knowledge across our multinational partners so that collectively we can be better at conducting that operation.
The US-led battle group has been stationed in Poland since 2017, following NATO's decision to deploy battle groups in the Baltics and Poland to strengthen the defence line along the alliance's eastern flank.
This region is of particular importance for the alliance because of the famous Suwałki corridor, right? So this is a corridor that connects Russia and Belarus to the Kaliningrad Oblast. And so it's important for us to protect this particular corridor because this connects Poland with Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. And so by us being here and present in this particular area, we demonstrate that, we will maintain a forward presence, we will establish deterrence.
In 2022, after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, NATO allies deployed additional forces to Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia.
9 months after the tragic collapse of a train station canopy which claimed the lives of 16 people, the tragedy continues to stoke up unrest across Serbia. Protesters in multiple cities took to the streets on Friday to demand justice for the victims of the Novi Sad accident. Memorial walks and marches were held across the country. The biggest protest was organized by students at the Belgrade train station under the name 9 Months Remember. The protesters blame corruption for the disaster and demand early elections that they hope would remove President Alexander Vučić and his party from power after 13 years. They accuse Vučić and his allies of ties to organized crime, violence against rivals and curbing media freedoms. Vučić denies these allegations. Sources tell TVP World that European cars will still face a 27.5% US import tariff, despite earlier promises from the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who said it would be capped at 15%. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports from Brussels.
The European Union exhaled a sigh of relief on Friday after news came in Thursday night that US President Donald Trump had signed an executive order stating that most EU goods exported into the US market will be slapped with a 15% tariff starting from the 8th of August. This was exactly what was agreed upon by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump in Scotland on Sunday, that the baseline tariff of 30%, which was initially threatened, would be scaled back to 15%. And what we heard coming out of the European Commission building, the Berlaymont in the Belgian capital, was praise mostly from the European Commissioner for Trade, Maros Šefčovič, who was dubbed the EU's tariff crisis negotiator.
The new US tariffs reflect the first results of the EU-US deal, especially the 15% all-inclusive tariff cap. This reinforced stability for European businesses as well as trust in the transatlantic economy. EU exporters now benefit from a more competitive position. The work continues.
However, as experts pored over the executive order on Friday, some revealed fresh concerns that the deal isn't exactly what was promised that it would be. Now, according to sources that TV World has spoken with, this executive order, this 15% tariff ceiling, does not apply to cars. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stated in Scotland on Sunday that this 15% tariff ceiling would be applied to certain EU goods, specifically cars. This means that the automotive industry will continue to be targeted with a mammoth 27.5 import levy from the EU into the US. This will particularly impact Poland, as recent estimates from 2022 state that 8% of the country's GDP in 2022 came from the car industry, with almost 500,000 individuals employed in this sector. Other divergencies has materialised since Sunday, since those two leaders met in Scotland, particularly regarding energy. US President Donald Trump stated that over the next 4 years of his term, the EU will invest $750 billion into the energy sector there. However, we've heard commentary coming out of the European Commission that it is not within its own remit to make these purchases itself. It will rely on businesses and consumers to go to the spot market and shore up those contracts themselves. However, what we're hearing is that this is early days. We also know that other international trade partners on Thursday night were slapped with mammoth tariffs. We're thinking Canada being imposed with 35% tariffs, as well as Switzerland and Taiwan, up to 60 trading partners there. But work is still needing to be done to hammer out the details of this EU-US trade relationship. Angela Scugins from Brussels for TVP World.
Markets around the world are reacting to Donald Trump's newly announced tariffs imposed on allies and competitors alike. Stocks slumped in afternoon trading on Wall Street, and U.S. Treasury yields fell sharply on Friday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 451 points, or 1%, while the Nasdaq Composite fell 1.6%. Stocks in Europe and Asia also declined. Europe's Stoxx 600 was down 1.89% on the day and 2.5% on the week, on track for its biggest weekly drop since Trump announced his first major wave of tariffs on April 2nd. In the latest installment of Trump's tariff policy, the U.S. president hit Canada with a stiff 33% tariff, citing drug trafficking as the reason. Japan was hit with 15%, while Australia with only a 10% tariff. The EU will be subject to a 50% tariff as per the deal negotiated by Trump during his July trip to Scotland. The EU's top court has ruled against Italy's use of migrant detention centers in Albania. The court says EU countries cannot designate another nation as safe for asylum seekers unless that safety applies to each individual case. The ruling deals a blow to Italy's 2023 agreement with Albania. Our Europe correspondent Alex Cadier has this report.
In their tens of thousands, they arrived on Europe's shores, not always legally and often unwelcome. An all too familiar sight for Europe's Mediterranean countries, hundreds of migrants crammed in flimsy rafts, often hoping to escape lives even more perilous than this deadly journey. The question then became, where can they go, where can they stay, and what to do with those whose asylum claims are rejected, all without breaking the law. The answer from far-right politicians like Italy's Giorgia Meloni: send them to another country while their claims are examined, and leave them there if rejected. Italy struck a deal with Albania to send asylum seekers to the country. The migrants are shipped there, and Italy covers the costs, a deal which human rights groups opposed from the beginning.
There is an equal treatment with regard to those that are seeking asylum in Europe, in the EU, and in Italy as well. And of course, we are also concerned about the fact that they are deprived of their liberty as they will be detained, while this should be a measure of last resort when it's the case for migrants and refugees.
Now, the European Union's top court says Italy can fast-track asylum rejections, but must meet strict legal standards.
Articles do not preclude a member state from designating third countries as safe countries of origin by means of a legislative act, provided that such designation can be subject to judicial review regarding compliance with the substantive conditions of such designation.
A ruling immediately and strongly condemned by the Italian Prime Minister.
This incident should concern us all, including the political forces now celebrating the ruling, because it further curbs already curtailed capabilities of governments and parliaments to regulate and manage migration. The Supreme Court ruling weakens the policy of fighting against mass migration and protecting national borders.
Other European countries looking at creating similar schemes to deal with the growing number of migrants on their shores may now think twice. Irrespective of this ruling, migration will continue to divide Europe. On the one hand, politicians wanting to reduce migration at all costs. On the other, opponents who accuse them of cruelty, breaching human rights and pulling up the drawbridge to desperate people simply asking for a better life. Alex Cadier, TVP World.
And with this, we conclude our news update, but do stay with us. We're going to discuss the latest from Ukraine in a moment.